Draft talk keeps picking up for the Montreal Canadiens as a recent mock draft by Scott Wheeler at The Athletic has Montreal landing monster winger Lynden Lakovic from the WHL. The 6'4 winger still doesn't even know how to use his body properly yet creates incredible chances off the rush. We have to dive into this incredible possibility for Montreal with just one of their 2 picks and how that could be a huge impact for Montreal moving forward. Got to dive into that, but also we have a big update on Bogdan Konyushkov, a name we haven't mentioned in a while, and his insane performance in the playoffs over in Russia. And finally, a very interesting note from Scotty Bowman comparing this current Habs era to the best of all time. We have to talk about a lot of great stuff coming up in this episode of Habs Digest, but before we do, just want to remind you guys, half of you are still not subscribed, and we're less than 200 subscribers away from 21,000. Crazy that we're even saying that, but if you're enjoying the daily content all off season long, heading into the draft, heading into free agency, hit the button down below. I know you won't regret it. Jesse, let's start with some Scotty Bowman stuff. Now, this is a great article from Journal de Montréal that I will link down below. He said a lot of things, but the big thing that came out of this was that, look, he has confidence in the Hughes-Gorton team, and he said it reminds him of the Sam Pollock era of the Montreal Canadiens. Now, there's a lot we can get into here. He said, look, one of the big things is that Hughes and Gorton, they're not there to put on a show. You know, they have a plan. That's the big thing Scotty said. Gorton did great things for the Bruins and Rangers. Hughes was great as a player agent. And one of the other things he said in the article is about Sam Pollock. Sam never made a decision without consulting the people he trusted. And that Sam Pollock era of the Habs was 15 years way back, Jesse, 50 odd years ago now. That was the best, probably the best drafting era in Habs history, and I think that's where the big comparison is. We can draw comparisons to having a good team around to trust, having a plan, sticking to it, building through the draft. I kind of agree with them, and it's insane that we're hearing this kind of praise about this team.
For sure, because Scotty Bowman knows something about winning dynasty level teams, which is the goal here, and why this praise really matters so much. He's also kind of referring to how like Pollock, which I know many of our viewers can relate to, would be like open to like the conference to like counseling with like trusted advisors, which we're seeing. It's not just kind of one guy completely running the show, and really the Habs are so much the better for it. Like imagine we had just Jeff Gordon or just Ken Hughes. There's a world where that's the case. One of those 2 guys is our GM. Like, would this team feel the same? No. Like, we are benefiting so much by having both of them working together as really that 2-head beast. And again, Bowman really knowing something about, really about what it takes to really win, not just kind of 1 year, but kind of many years after in a row. So again, this is the praise. If you're Ken Hughes, this is what you want to hear, and from the person that you want to hear it from, because he certainly knows something about it.
Absolutely. Like, this is just, it's so cool to see this. We like diving into Habs history every now and then, but again, we're talking Scotty Bowman, we're talking Sam Pollock. We hear some of you guys even saying in streams in the comments about how this reminds you of them for those of us that were around, not myself, but like, not us, but necessarily back in the 70s. Like, this was an incredible time, but yeah, leave your thoughts down below. I mean, it's always cool to see praise like that. And honestly, for those of you that know the Sam Pollock era, there's probably no better praise you can get for the Habs. But look, Jesse, I think that transitions well into what we have going right now, because we're talking draft and we're also talking Habs prospects, and a big thing just recently, Bogdan Konyushkov. And I wanted to show you guys this. This is his elite prospects. Now, you might notice this year in the KHL, he did have a downtick in points, played 67 games compared to 65 last year, half as many goals, 11 fewer points. Of course, the captaincy was taken from him in favor of Slava Voinov. His production went down because his playing time went down because other more veteran players came in. We can't forget, though, he was a captain last year. But the very interesting thing is he was sent for the VHL playoffs this year. And while Elite Prospects has him at 9 points in 9 games, overall, he actually has 10 points in 10 games via Hockey Serenity here on Twitter. Good follow as well. He has 1 goal, 9 points in his last 7. Jesse, Bogdan Konyushkov, look, we are presidents of the Bogdan fan club. For those super fans that are here every single day, they know that. Bogdan Konyushkov is one of these guys that, look, his contract's up after, I believe, 1 more season, maybe 2 more seasons. He's one of these guys that we can't just forget about. It's good to check in on him every now and then, a bit of a down year, but his utter offensive dominance in the VHL right now just reminds us, like, this guy's still very young, and he still has a lot to give, potentially in the future, even for Montreal.
Yeah, he's a low-key legend already here in Montreal, and he's really kind of working on kind of rounding out his overall game, so to speak, of really kind of improving to maybe take a step back offensively, to again, what we're seeing with a lot of kind of players within the organization, to work on his defensive game. Why? Because he cares more about winning than anything else. Like, Bogdan is really like a team-first guy. That's one of the first things that we really know about him, and admittedly, like, he's not like at Lane Hudson levels of offense. even though he's been on a heater recently, playing really well, kind of playing that setup, man. That being said, like, we know Bogdan Konyushkov to be extremely reliable as a young player. And again, to have some sneaky upside offensively, which I think we'll kind of see come through. Again, the big knock is that, we'd like him at 6 feet to maybe be, maybe a little bit taller and then, kind of at 170, a little bit heavier. That being said, right-hand D is always kind of in need. And we've seen Lane Hudson, a smaller guy, be very effective with the Montreal Canadiens. So again, a very interesting pick. Like, when is he going to come over? If he ever does, I think he could be very, very interesting for the organization.
Agree. And look, late round draft pick. He's playing well as a right shot defenseman. I mean, what's not to love about him, right? Again, we don't know when he'll come over. We wish he maybe would take that little stride defensively, but as he plays some special teams, he does well, and you put him in the VHL, he still proves he's way too good for it. So I think, again, if he can get his role back in the KHL as the guy he was last year, there could be some very big things coming for Bogdan. Leave some Bogdan love down below if you're members of the Bogdan fan club. Final thing though, Jesse, got to talk about mock drafts. Now again, the Athletic, we've done this before. We're right back to it. These Athletic mock drafts, and Scott Wheeler recently posted his, where he drafted the entire first round. And his selection for Montreal is a name that we haven't mentioned a whole lot. And his name is Lynden Lakovic. And he plays for the Moose Jaw Warriors, and he's coming off a very, very good year. The big thing with Lynden Lakovic, he's a young 18 as well. He was born in December. Well, I guess not that young 18, but I guess middle of the year, whatever. 58 points in 47 games. He led his team in scoring by 10 points, despite playing 21 fewer games than the two guys below him. Shout out Rylan Kovacevic. I assume there's a relation to Jonathan Kovacevic. Did not confirm. Can only guess that. Some other great players here too, like Brandon Yeager playing 21 games for them. But Lynden Lakovic, the draft prospect for this year, has been amazing. And just to dive into what Scott said, look, I think a pro-built winger who can play up and down the lineup and a defenseman could probably be the focus for the Habs' 2 picks here. Now, he mentioned someone else that at the next pick that maybe we'll talk about in a future video. But look, Lakovic, Bear Carbonneau, even Malcolm Spence would fit. But look, Lakovic is the most natural fit for what they need to surround guys like Cole Caufield and Ivan Demidov with. And that's the thing with Lakovic, Jesse, and we can get into some of the advanced stats after, but he is a monster. 6'4", 190, and he still doesn't really fully know how to use his body. To me, what does this remind you of? I mean, maybe he's like a less skilled Slafkovsky. That's some pretty high praise. I'm not saying he's on that level, but a 6'4" build, a guy who just has a lot of skill, develops his offense off the rush, hasn't quite learned how to use his physicality yet. I'm just saying there are some parallels. This guy seems very interesting to me.
For sure. And while size isn't everything, it's something that is very important to the Montreal Canadiens for a great reason, especially with a player like this, where not only has the size, but he's known to have that explosive kind of first stride, which we know is so important today in the NHL. High-end offensive instincts here. Obviously, he's getting comps to like Toffoli kind of for his shot, and then also to Timo Meier because of the size as well. We're seeing parts of his game that need improvement is maybe in like the defensive reads, a little bit from there. But again, that size is extremely interesting of what he can bring, really projecting as a top 6 winger here in the NHL. So really kind of fitting that bill. We know we want a little bit of size and we want that compete. And it's looking like we might have some players kind of available there. That being said, it is so tempting, Josh, again, to like, do we package something to maybe get like more of a centerman kind of that seems like not quite where we are at 16, but like maybe just a couple picks kind of before. So very interested to see how this plays out. But obviously this player bringing a lot of these things that this Montreal Canadiens organization would find interest.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's a very interesting prospect. And I completely agree as well. We could trade these picks, but like, there's no guarantee we trade both either. And the beauty about picking 16 and 17 is you'll probably get one of your guys no matter what, which is really awesome. But yeah, like I think trading up for a center could work. But look, if you're picking here, why not go for a guy that, fits that bill? He's one of these guys that's like the NHL certainty, maybe not as high, but like the upside is really there. And look, this is from Dauber Prospects. They say, look, he's an intriguing player because he has a good combo of skating, size, playmaking, and raw skill, but he's not really a power forward yet because he doesn't drive inside or use his body or physicality. And I'm just saying, if you can create the offense that he has created, without that, it's crazy. And there's a reason that Craig Button, Jesse, has him as high as 10 in some mock drafts. There's some people I'm even seeing talking about number 9. Like, I don't know what it is. There's a lot of late risers this time of the year, Jesse, and how many times have we seen before? The big bodies with skill, they climb the closer and closer we get to the draft. Yeah. I mean, I honestly wouldn't be shocked. I mean, would you if Lakovic ends up going even higher than this 16 spot just because good skill, good size, and you can always teach a bit of physicality?
Right. It's not like Bennett Beck at Xhekaj exactly, but it's a little bit of that profile where we saw him really climb, and probably like for a good reason. So there is a reason. Again, those you want to see players like. It's often better to go with a guy that's kind of climbing at the draft again when it kind of the pressure is mounting to play well and when everything's not set in stone versus the guys that are kind of falling down a little bit like we saw with a Hensler, like not to shout anybody out, who's maybe kind of doing the inverse of kind of going down in the draft right now. So again, very interesting to see what we have here. Josh, like again, I am just so happy with the season that we have that we're going to have some amazing picks. You have to feel like probably one of those at least that Kent Hughes is going to use that is still going to be valuable, that, you know, to kind of add to this team as we're still growing and even as we're kind of getting more into contention mode to then still be able to add players like this of value as well. Kind of aiming for that playoff type of goal. I love that that's what we're aiming for in that draft selection right now, which I think is getting so many Habs fans so excited.
Yeah, and I love this too because, like, you know, draft best player available always for sure, but when you got a guy that looks like one of the best and is a good fit, and when you have two shots at it potentially, again, I think they will trade at least one of these picks. It's such an enviable position to be in for so many teams. You make the playoffs unexpectedly. You have 2 mid-first round picks, not to mention a bunch of extra picks later in the draft and for years to come to move on from.
A lot.
There is, too much even. No such thing. This is going to be great. So whether we make the pick or not, it's up to Kent Hughes and them. But honestly, like, Lynden Lakovic is a guy that I would not mind picking. Let us know what you think about him. This is kind of our first time doing a little deep dive on him. Love to know your thoughts. But look, that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. There's a lot more stuff coming out. The other Habs pick in this mock draft. We got some other names linked to the Habs for free agency trade. A lot of great stuff coming, and I know you won't want to miss a thing. And if that's true, hit the free subscribe button down below. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.